This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, New York Attorney General Letitia James scored a big win that isn't really getting covered many places. Can you speak on what just happened in court?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, she is racking up win after win after win, and this is as big as any of them. Right-wing conspiracy theorists, convicted felons, and fraudsters. Jacob Wall and Jack Berman have to pay $1.25 million for their robocall scheme, where they tried to intimidate Black voters from voting in the 2020 election. Democracy Doc has been covering both the civil and the criminal case since 2020. And this is another example of where the civil justice system can have as much bite or have a lot of bite and bring justice, just like the parallel criminal process.
Now, these guys are buffoonish, and so they got caught. But can you talk about similar efforts taken by folks who aren't such abject clowns that are kind of skating under the radar and actually getting away with it?
Yeah, look, this is one of the great scourges of American politics, is that you have these right-wing fraudsters who perpetrate misinformation and disinformation and just outright lies in order to mislead voters, intimidate them from voting, and dissuade them from voting. We see this every election cycle. I mean, you can go back years now and see instance after instance where there have been these right-wing efforts to spread lies about what day election day is, who the candidates are. I remember there were lies going back years that if you voted for Barack Obama, you couldn't vote for other Democrats. If you voted for Democrats down ballot, it canceled your vote for President Obama. Like, this information is toxic in the bloodstream, and it's getting worse because you have more outlets for it. You have more ways that this disinformation can spread throughout the country. Remember, we saw the Russian Federation and its various apparatchik spread this kind of misinformation in the 2016 election, and we've
Yeah.
been warned about it in 2020 and 2024 about the possibility of nation states. But it's at its core, it is right wing propaganda and misinformation intended to prey on innocent voters.
And you've said before that election vigilantism, for example, is the biggest threat that we face in our elections. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that we don't see another article or expose or recorded phone call of what the Republican Party or these right-wing vigilantes are doing to prepare for the 2024 election. Everything from launching mass challenges, which is something I've written about extensively, to going door to door and intimidating voters, suing states to try to force voter purges. Look, there was a lawsuit just recently dismissed in Nevada. Good for the court in Nevada, where one of these right wing groups was suing to try to strike down a law that prevents election worker intimidation. Stephen Miller is at that same tactic in Arizona, and we see the use of big technology and big databases by these conservative actors to try to make it harder to vote and easier to cheat. And part of making it easier to cheat is to harass voters at the place where they want to vote or return a ballot to a drop box. Or try to remove them from the polls altogether. This is going to be a dominant theme. People ought to pay attention to what Brian talks about, because oftentimes he is talking about these themes before anyone else in the mainstream media is. And I'm telling you, come next September and October, people are going to be saying, "Hey, how come we hadn't heard about this before?"
Yeah, and you brought up the fact that these fights are happening in the courts right now. So for those watching, I mean, Mark and his team are the ones battling back these instances of election vigilantism and just anti-democracy, anti-democratic efforts writ large. So if you want to support the invaluable work that he and his team are doing right now, please sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the free news outlet he founded to focus on everything voting in elections. It's also an amazing resource. So it has the double benefit of supporting their amazing team and also giving you a ton of valuable information. So I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Mark, can you talk about the ties that we're learning about between these election vigilantes and the actual Republican Party?
Yeah, it used to be that they hid these ties. Even in 2016, we had to go to great lengths to figure out what the ties were between the Republican Party, the Trump campaign, and these election deniers and election vigilantes. And one of the things, that we've seen with the degradation of our democracy and the descent of the Republican Party into full-fledged election denialism and the mainstream media's, frankly, normalization of these things is it's not hard to find these ties. I was just the other day, there was an article entitled, and this is the headline: Republican National Committee courts election conspiracy theorists to help watch the polls. And people are like, oh yeah, well, that's just kind of like what they do. Of course they court election conspiracy theorists. There was another one in Wired, of all places, inside the election denial group's plan to disrupt the November. And it talks about it like as if oh, of course there's a plan to disrupt the November
just
election.
Out in the open.
Yeah, it's out in the open. They are screaming it out loud. And, it is a coordinated effort between these right-wing vigilante organizations, the grassroots groups that Cleta Mitchell and others are involved in. That's groups that Mike Lindell, True the Vote, Michael Flynn is involved in some of these. And as you point out, the institutional Republican Party at the state level, at the national level. Michael Whatley was put in charge of the RNC. Ronna McDaniel was shown her walking papers for one reason and one reason only. Well, maybe two reasons. One is because they wanted to take more money for Trump. But the main reason is that they didn't think Ronna McDaniel was sufficiently committed to the big lie. And so the RNC is all in on this. The Republican state parties are all in on this, and they're quite boastful of it.
Yeah. Well, then are the Democrats doing enough to counter this threat that's being posed by these election vigilantes?
Look, I mean, I can only speak for myself. We're doing everything we can. I mean, my law firm, we are in more than 50 lawsuits in 23 states. We monitor this stuff. I speak out about it everywhere I can in every forum. You're doing everything you can, but we need everyone, all aspects of the Democratic Party, all aspects of the progressive movement, of civil society, of corporate America. We need everyone to speak out and say, this is not okay, and to take steps to fight against it. For some lawyers like me, it's going to be in court. For people like you, it's speaking out to your huge audience. But everyday Americans have a role to play here in saying it's not okay if their neighbors are disenfranchised. It's not okay that there is a political party in their community that is trying to disenfranchise voters.
Yeah, litigating 50 cases right now. So again, I know that I'm a broken record here, but these are the exact voices of people that we need to lift up. So democracydocket.com. I'll put the link in the post description of this video. Make sure to click on it and support Marc and his team. I mean, they are the ones, kicking ass right now and making sure to protect our democracy in the courts, which is the front line of this battle right now. Marc, we're seeing such scattershot efforts across the country to kind of rein in election vigilantism. What would be the most effective way to actually shore up our democracy from these efforts so that we're not just kind of like, batting down scattershot efforts here and there and with hoping for different rulings from different courts, different circuit courts, and just, kind of crossing our fingers?
Yeah, we need federal legislation. I mean, the fact is Congress came painfully close to enacting the Freedom to Vote Act, which would have prohibited so much of what we are talking about today and would have required states to put in place so many safeguards for voters that we've talked about throughout this series. It came, like I said, within a hair's breadth. It passed the House and almost overcame the filibuster in the Senate. We need federal legislation because that is the ultimate solution. Absent federal legislation for 2024, where we're not going to have federal legislation, we need every state that cares about democracy to pass laws that ban this kind of election vigilantism, including states that are controlled by Democrats. Those states, there are laws that are on the books enabling this in blue states that need to be changed, and they need to be changed quickly, and we need to do that. Absent that, we all need to be stewards of our democracy. We all need to be looking out for our neighbor, whether they are voting for Joe Biden or Donald Trump or for a candidate we like or not. We cannot tolerate vigilantism in our community, disenfranchising voters. So every one of you watching this video, you have an obligation and a role here to stand up against the vigilantes, to not give them quarter in your communities. Because until we have federal legislation, until states are doing a more active role there, it's going to be on the rest of our shoulders to do everything we can.
Perfectly put, as always. Again, I'll put the link for Democracy Docket right here on this screen. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
And I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.